Woods, Part 4 by Chris Crawford. I wiped the blood from my mouth as a cold chill swept past me in the cavern I was now sitting in. The silence was deafening. My chest burned as my lungs filled with air and pressed against my broken ribs. I grappled with the reality of how wrong things had turned. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Doug was dead. Had the others gotten away? Were they even still alive? Chad was badly injured, and Doug had the only other gun. I lost my gun in the fall. Not that it would have done any good against those monsters. I finally saw one of them up close. It was a nightmarish and archaic creature, born of pure evil and an insatiable bloodlust. It towered at least 7 or 8 feet tall. It had blood-red eyes that glowed with malicious intent. It was humanoid, but with the face of a beast and a massive snout protruding, its jagged fangs overlapping on either side. It haunched when it moved, and its arms were long and disproportionate, dangling giant hands with razor-sharp claws inches from the ground. It had thick moss and foliage growing all over its back that intertwined with branches and brush, as if it was carrying a piece of the forest floor with it. And in these woods, that meant they could hide in plain sight. I reeled from the pain as I started to stand. What felt like broken glass stabbed my insides as I made the slightest of movements. I had to find a way out of this cave, even if only to live for a few more minutes. I forced myself to start walking, ignoring the pain. As my adrenaline started pumping, the pain became less intense. I followed the direction of the wind through the dark. Every once in a while, the moonlight would slip through the cracks in the cavern ceiling. The narrow tunnel began to widen, and I came to a large room. A larger crack in the canopy of the cave illuminated the entire room. There were markings on the walls. A grotesque caricature of filthy beast were swarming a circle surrounded by trees, with a woman in the middle, standing next to the fire. On the other side of the circle was a man holding a flaming sword up in the air. Underneath the circle were words in a language that I couldn't read, but it looked ancient. Above the circle were the phases of the sun and moon. I turned back to the rest of the room and noticed a pedestal in the center of the cave. As I moved closer, I started to notice familiar shapes: police badges, wallets, purses, and a few cell phones. My cell phone and Amy's cell phone. They were all broken and smashed, except for Amy's. None of this made any sense. These monsters didn't show any signs of independent thought. The only intelligence that they displayed is that they hunt in a pack and toy with their prey before they slaughter them. They didn't put those markings on the walls. They didn't gather these mementos here in the cave. As the wheels spun endlessly in my head, more and more questions kept pouring in. Why did they not follow me in here? What was going on? My train of thought was interrupted by the sound of shuffling from the opposite end of the cave. A shadowy figure emerged from the exit of the underground room, opposite of where I came in. My heart was pounding as I looked for anything that I could use as a weapon. When my eyes adjusted, it was a woman. She was dirty, and her clothes were tattered. She was malnourished, and she looked crazed, like she hadn't slept in days. She shambled closer, and I recognized her. It was Rachel, one of Amy's friends that disappeared with her. Rachel, is that you? Oh my God, what happened? Where are the others? Where's Amy? I pleaded for answers. She blankly stared at me as she continued to shamble towards me. Picking up speed, her glazed-over expression said it all. There was nobody home. She was on autopilot, clearly destroyed by whatever traumas she had endured since they went missing. She grabbed my shoulders tight enough for her dirty fingernails to break the skin, and her face became serious. She pointed at the markings on the wall and started whispering what sounded like nonsense. But it wasn't nonsense at all. It was a different language. She recited the words over and over. Terra, sanguinium savot nas, igna animas damari et ipsas venima. Each time louder and louder until she was screaming. I tried to shake her off me. Terra sanguinium savat nas, inga animas damare, et ipsa venam, et ipses venam, et ipses venam. She screamed uncontrollably, her vocal cords cracking and her terror intensifying. Her jaw looked like it was going to come unhinged. Rachel, you have to calm down. Just breathe. What are you saying? I asked. And then she collapsed on the floor. Blood started pouring out from under what was left of her shirt. I lifted it up to find an enormous open wound. Her stomach had been slashed and she was bleeding out. Rachel, you're gonna be okay, I lied as I tried to comfort her, knowing what was about to happen next. Her breathing became shallow, and the light started to fade from her eyes as she continued to sob softly. She tightened her grip on my shoulder with one last ounce of strength and whispered, "Blood and fire. He's coming." And then it was silent. Her arm went limp, and she was gone. I cried. I put my head in my hands and slumped to my knees. I wept through tear-soaked lips. I really couldn't take any more. I felt my sanity slipping further away. There was death at every turn in these woods, except for my own. Why am I still alive? Why am I witnessing these horrible things? What did I do to deserve this? After a few minutes, I pulled myself back up to my feet. I felt the wind on my face again, and embraced the smell of death coming from the opening Rachel had come through. I was ready for whatever horrors lay on the other side. I glanced back at the markings on the far side of the room that Rachel had been pointing at. I noticed something that I didn't notice before. If there was no fire in the center of the circle, there would be only ash, just like the clearing in the woods. Somehow the clearing was the key to all of this, and I had to get out of this cave. I left through the opening that Rachel had come through, and the smell of death became stronger. I stumbled over something soft on the ground. It was a human arm. My eyes readjusted and I saw the bodies, bits and pieces. A torso here, a face there, a man's leg draped over a woman's arm. They were piled up and rotting. The police officers and the rest of Amy's party. Doug was there. They were all here, in disarray, discarded and left behind. No one would ever find them. Their families would never know what had happened to them. There would be no closure for any of their deaths. I crawled over the entrails and pieces of my friends and people I met along the way. The cold flesh squished between my fingers as I clawed my way through the body after body. These moments seemed like an eternity. This was evil incarnate, and I was in hell. Out of nowhere, a breeze of fresh air hit my face, and I saw the light. It was the end of the tunnel, and I was outside. The sound of running water was near and getting louder. A scream tore through the night air like a knife through hot butter. It was Renee. Thank God. They were still alive, and I'm not alone. There is still time. I ran as fast as I could towards them and lost my footing at the river's edge. I fell into the water and thrashed about in the darkness. My ribs being broken made it hard to swim, hard to breathe. The water was moving too fast. I couldn't make heads or tails of where I was or what was around me. It was all just darkness, cold, wet darkness. Up was down, left was right. This was bad. I was going to drift further away from them, and this was going to be the end. Out of the abyss, I felt something warm grab my arm and pull me up out of the water. It was Chad. I coughed up some water and struggled to regain my breath. My situational awareness was returning. We were on a small island in the middle of the river, maybe 40 feet from the shore on either side. All three of them were still here, and they were still alive. I cried out in excitement as relief washed over me. Then I noticed their faces. They were not relieved. They were terrified, and they were all looking in the same direction. Just on the other side of the water were the monsters, all 50 of them, clear as day, patiently waiting, stalking, lined up and ready to slaughter. Something was different though. Through the panic, it took me a moment to realize there was something behind them, lurking in the trees off to the side. I would know that face anywhere. It was Amy. Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this story. I know I have. It is unfortunately the end of this story, at least for now. But don't worry, we have another tale coming your way tomorrow. And trust me, it's quite good. If you enjoyed this and haven't already, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button. And of course, be sure to check back tomorrow for another story. Anyway, thanks so much for listening.